Today we're going to focus on revelation and human language. So far in this course we've been talking about God and identifying God with the transcendent. And that's an important point to make, and Albl does make this point in the first chapter of his text, that not everyone who experiences the transcendent will call it God. The term God is often reserved for a second-person perspective on the ultimate reality. That means, well, what it means when we usually talk about God in our Western cultures, we're talking about a person who created and animates the universe. Now, not everybody who experiences the transcendent will experience that as an experience of a person. For example, in Buddhism, the 12 links of dependent origination are seen as the ultimate reality. They're the way that the whole universe comes into being. They are not a person, they are an impersonal process. Taoism says that the way that can be known or named is not the nameless Tao. It does not define or limit experiences of the transcendent to a person or a interpersonal relationship. Newer religion, we can debate, if this movement has hit the definition of religion yet, but you do see people in the United States, especially, practicing Jediism, which is kind of a religious interpretation of the transcendent force in the Star Wars universe. So the Jedi see the force see the transcendent not as a person, but as an impersonal force that flows through all things and unites all things. And besides these third-person, these impersonal ways to know that people can experience the transcendent is also sometimes experienced as self, as in the case of Atman in Hinduism. A famous and spiritually significant saying within Hinduism is Atman is Brahman. So in the Hindu tradition, they acknowledge experiencing of the transcendent as the experience of your true self. So some people, may say they don't believe in God, but they might also claim to believe in the transcendent. Again, what they're saying is that they don't believe in God as a person. They might believe that God can be experienced in an impersonal or in an impersonal way, or as the true self. We do see a commonality that'll help maybe understand why we talk about the transcendent as God, like why we who believe in God or see God as another person would experience the transcendent in that way. And that's because these transcendent experiences go beyond time and space. So in the transcendent experience, when people have these, they talk about feeling a union with all things. Again, when space breaks down, the division between things break down, boundaries between things break down, and people have experiences of union. Now this is often then understood as love, because that's what love does. Love brings things together. This is the force, this is the power of love, so to speak. People also talk about not just feeling union with everything that exists, but also feeling a union with the source of things, a connection with the ground of being, or that from which everything arises. And finally, people have the experience of the infinite. Again, when you transcend time, transcend space, you're not just going, partially a way around, or some way around, but you're having an experience of oneness with everything and beyond. So you can understand how these experiences of the transcendent, how they are going to fit our understanding of God. Right? So in other words, Since we believe that God created the universe and that God holds all things in being, right, there's a source of being, that God is infinite, we see experiences of the transcendent as experiences of God. And we're going to see experiences of the transcendent as experiences of the Creator, the person, right? That other person with whom we can have a personal relationship. Right? Again, it's not the only way that you can experience the transcendent. It's not the only way that you can experience God, so to speak. But it is the main way that we do it within the Christian tradition, within the Jewish tradition, and within the Muslim tradition. Okay, what is revelation? Well, the word is from the root word reveal, right, which means to show. Right? So in Revelation, God is sharing himself with us. Right? It's God revealing himself to us. Now, I'm going to use the male pronouns for God throughout the course because it is just the traditional way we talk about God. There are some good reasons that people give for using a male pronoun for God, and there are some not so good reasons that people give for using a male pronoun for God. I'm just going to use it as part of the tradition in this case, as an acknowledgement to the historical revelation and the way that God reveals himself to us through history. But please note that the Catechism of the Catholic Church and church tradition make it quite clear that God is neither male nor female. God is pure spirit. Okay, so by using the male pronoun for God, I'm not limiting anyone's experience of God. I'm not limiting the way anyone wants to talk about God to just that pronoun. Okay, glad we could get through that. How does God share himself with us? How does God reveal himself to us? Well, we talk about two ways. First of all, general revelation. General revelation is basically nature. Right? It's the way that God reveals himself in and through the created world. So we believe that you can come to know God through coming to know his creation. Right? It'd be like if you were a fan of a particular poet, musician, or visual artist. You might look at their work and you might come to understand that person. You might come to know something about them from their work. Right? Well, that's a general revelation. We believe that you can know God through nature, through the world that he's created. We also believe in special revelation, or historical revelation. And that's a special revelation that God shared with us through history. The first stage is the covenant that God formed with the people of Israel. And that is a partial revelation. He did not reveal everything about himself to them all at once. No, he started with a partial revelation with Israel, and then he revealed himself fully when he incarnated as Jesus Christ, when he became man to share himself with us fully. So we talked a little bit about how God reveals himself to us. Now, why does God reveal himself to us? Right? Well, the answer is love. Right? In the Christian understanding, the motive is essentially love, as Albl says, right? God wants to share his eternal perfect love with all his creation. Right? In the Vatican II document, Dei Verbum talks about God sharing himself with us, or God becoming man, the Word becoming flesh, so that we can share in his divine nature. St. Athanasius said that God became man so man may become God. This means that God became one of us so that we could share in his divine nature. And like we talked about earlier, why did he want that? Well, because he wanted us to share in his joy, that our joy may be complete. Basically, it's because he loves us. Now, just one more reminder here. When we're talking about faith, we're not talking about a blind faith. Right? Our faith in general and historical revelation isn't blind. What is it? Well, it works the same way that everyday faith works. Right? It works the same way as the faith that allows us to function in the world in everyday situations. So we have a personal experience, right? And as much as that allows us to connect with or trust the authorities or experts in some area, which is supported by the community. Now notice what I did here. I kind of switched it around, right? When we did the reading from Ratzinger, we started with trusting the authorities, and then we went to trusting the community. And then we went to, and if that matches up with our personal experience, if that fits with it, then we tend to believe that much is true. But we can also think about it the other way around. We can also start from personal experience, right? Take our own experience kind of in the forefront, right? And then say, hey, now who says the same things? Who is saying something that's going along with what I'm experiencing, right? Faith especially often works that way. We'll have an experience and we'll say, we won't quite understand it, we won't quite know how to talk about it. We'll hear someone talk and we'll say, oh, that's exactly what I'm talking about. This person has had a similar experience to me, right? They put into words what I was feeling. Now, as God shares himself with us, he does it through human words and concepts. Right? The fullness of his revelation was as a person, fully human, fully divine. Jesus walked and talked, lived a fully human life. And so we have to realize that human language is limited, God is unlimited. Right? So that we use human language to describe God. We use human language to share the revelation that God gives to us. We have to recognize that we can't fully know or describe God in human concepts. So how do we talk about God then? Well, we talk about God through analogy. God is not anything. He is no thing. So when we talk about God, we are really talking about what he is not. Right? As St. Thomas Aquinas says, we cannot grasp what God is, but only what he is not, and how other things are related to him. We can't put God into human words and concepts. Right? God, again, transcends time and space. Right? We don't have words like that. Our human language is dichotomistic. It talks about different things. How do we talk about that which is in all things and holds all things together? We don't have words that work for that. So we talk about God using the apophatic approach. Right? This means that we talk about what is not. We talk about him in negation. In the Eastern Christian tradition, they talk about this as knowing the energies of God. Right? We can't know God's essence. We can't know who he is in himself. But we can see the effects of his being. We can see the energies or the manifestations of his nature. So, to understand what we mean about approaching God or having knowledge of God through analogies, it's important to understand what we mean, what we're talking about as God as the source of being. So we understand God as the unlimited perfection and source of the goods that are manifest in the world in a limited way. Right? So, St. James in the first chapter of his epistle says, all good giving and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no alteration or shadow caused by change. In other words, all the goods that we experience in life, right? The source and perfection of them is God. As St. Thomas Aquinas said, whatever good we attribute to creatures pre-exists in God in a more excellent and higher way. Right? So again, it's analogy. God is like something, right? So for example, when we say God is love, what are we saying? We're saying God is like our experience of love, but in an infinitely perfect way, right? We're saying God is our Father. We're not saying, He walks us through wheat fields on His shoulders, like in the picture here, right? We're not saying He gets kicked out of CYO basketball games. No, what are we saying? We're using our experience and analogy of the love, unconditional love, that we may have been fortunate enough to experience from our earthly fathers, from our biological or adopted earthly fathers. And we're saying God is like that, right? But again, we have to be apophatic about it. We also have to say God is not like that, right? There's certain things about my father that would not be properly associated to God or attributed to God. And even the good things about my father are not the same as God, because they are simply a manifestation that finds its source in His goodness. So the degree is different. One of my favorite descriptions of God in Scripture is from Hebrews chapter 12. Our God is a consuming fire. Again, what does this mean? Well, God is like a consuming fire, right? He burns with love for you. And His love purifies you the way that fire will purify a metal when the metal is being treated in the fire. So it's important we realize when we say things about God, we say God is this, God is that, we have to realize we're speaking by analogy. We also have to acknowledge that God is not like the thing that we're comparing Him to. And we have to bring in the word like, right? Because our human language cannot express God in Himself. Now, does that mean we can't know anything about God? No, it doesn't. Right? We can, with our limited language, have a true but limited understanding of God. Saying God is love is a significant thing. We might not be able to grasp with our human concepts the fullness of God's love, but we can experience it in a limited way.